Let's go. Ready? From the top. My favorite shows on TV have 12 minutes of advertising. I can't get behind that kind of time.
Eat quickly, drive faster, make more money now. I can't get behind that.
My kids say, he said to me, and I'm like, and he's like, and she's like.
It's all, he's all, she's all.
I can't get behind that kind of like English. That'll be 6 to 8 weeks before delivery.
The rising oceans, the warming temperatures.
The dying polar bears, no tigers in 50 years.
Rising poison in the air and water.
I can't understand why the price of gas suddenly rises when oil goes up.
But takes months to go down.
I've made many decisions in my life that I regret. But I think picking the William Shatner, Henry Rollins thing for our call-in shows is not one of those decisions. It's not a decision I regret. You see the distinction I'm making here today. All right, today's an all-call show. we think we know which number you should call. We're like 90% positive that that the call-in number is. I've worked in other stations, and there's the idea of having kind of a flexible call-in number. You know, could be this, could be that. You know, but we think it's 888-720-WNPR. We feel with some certainty that it's that 888-720-WNPR. And let me give you the non-alphanumeric version, the merely numeric version, in other words, 888-720-9677. 888-720-9677. You know what? Just call us up and tell us what you had for lunch or something. Just so we can make sure that this works. Oh. Before we get to, I'll throw out a topic or two, but before we get to that, I have to say that every time I drive by a sign that says "Unmask our kids," my first thought is, are your kids living a double life or something? Do you think that, like, they have a secret identity? Do you not know who your kids are? And if you don't, and you need to unmask them, why are you dragging us in, the theoretical implied us, into this question? Why should we be involved in this? And then, that only lasts for a millisecond. And then I realize what they're really saying, which is take our kids' masks off so we can spread the Delta variant faster. That's what they mean. But briefly, I misunderstand. So I also want to say one other thing by way of caveat, and that is that I had a colonoscopy yesterday. Too much information. You want too much information. Actually, I know I'm going to write about it in my newsletter. So you have to get that if you want too much information. But I will attribute any mistakes I make to the lingering effects of anesthesia, even though I'm pretty sure I don't have any. But, it seems fair game. I don't know. It's getting never mind. I'm going to write about this. All right. So, the original plan was to do a true Ask Me Anything show where you could, and we still are technically, essentially going with that you can essentially call up. And if you want to talk about Corona beer doesn't taste how it used to or something, you can do that. And the number is 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677, unless it's not. But it's also, we have to deal with reality, which is that, for good or ill, there's been just an incessant drumbeat of Afghanistan coverage. I don't think there's any reason for there not to be, although you may think ultimately. Well, here's the argument against what's been happening in the media. The argument against it is that, first of all, a lot of people are pretending to know things that they don't know. I am not going to do that today. I am notably and statedly unqualified to have opinions about Afghanistan. Not that stops anyone, but that is my position. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is, after sort of not caring about this very much for most of the last 20 years, suddenly there's a big change and everybody cares about it theoretically. I'm not really even sure that's true. I'm not even sure that, there's a subset of Americans who are watching a lot of cable news, maybe listening also to public radio. They're upset about it. Or they're being told to be upset about it. I'm not even sure how big an issue it is. I mean, obviously, if you have members of your family who fought there, who served there, it matters a great deal to you. If you are of Afghani descent, you obviously care very much about it. There are plenty of people who care a lot about it. I'm just sort of saying in terms of the kind of issue that it's been made into. And I think it's even that is kind of pulling away from the doc. There's a way in which it's, if it were, in fact, thoughtful coverage about, first of all, what's happening to the people there, what is going to happen to the people there, which, by the way, we don't even know. I mean, I think the Taliban are trying to rebrand, but I don't think the Taliban are probably all that different. But they are attempting to tell the world that they're different. And I think in the early hours when all the cameras are trained on Kabul, they will try to pretend that they are different. But we don't really know what's going to happen. So anyway, I mean, but also the other problem with this is it's now become reflexive good guy, bad guy political coverage. Most of it is just turning into this generalized either critique of the Biden administration or a critique of the Trump administration's prior actions, or, people are just kind of riding whatever color horse they usually ride. Anyway, we can talk about that, and we can talk about other things. All right, so the number is 888-720-WNPR, 888-720-9677. I have other things I want to say about this, but before I do that, I will take a call that is not about Afghanistan. It's about something else that I'm probably unqualified to speak about. Although, actually, I've been talking about climate change for a really long time. I was actually talking about it when it was still global warming, back on a radio station that was very unsympathetic to my views. I mean, their audience was unsympathetic to my views. Here's Mary in Hartford.
Hi.
Hi, you're on the air.
So I wanted to talk about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate report that's come out. It came out last Monday. And, the Delta variant and what's happening in Afghanistan, these world crises often overshadow what's also a global crisis, but something we locally have a lot of capacity to do something about. Unlike Afghanistan, we could call our federal elected officials and ask them to, provide mercy for the people in Afghanistan, more support for the soldiers. But with respect to the climate crisis, there's a lot of need for local discussion about managing nature where we are and where we actually have the most control. So that's what I'd like to talk about.
All right. No, I think that's first of all, it's a fine thing to talk about and true. We, last week, were very close to, and I still want to do this. Our shows are usually cut up into 3 segments, and we had an idea for sort of 3 relatively small things that you could do that if everybody did, wouldn't fix anything, but would just begin to make a tiny bit of difference. And we'd actually come up with 3 of those. One of them, oddly enough, was moss. Moss is really interesting in terms of how much carbon it absorbs and stuff like that, and can probably if you put in sort of a lot of moss in your yard as opposed to trying to plant trees and waiting for them to grow, you'd probably be better off. But I don't know if that's the kind of thing that you're thinking of. But it is sort of it is in terms of our consumption, our behavior. I mean, I basically think human beings are untamable. I think the human race is probably not going to make it. If you look at that UN report very carefully, it's like they're almost trying to tell us that without trying to be too obvious about it. But we ought to try, and we ought to try for the sake of young people, people who have their whole lives ahead of them.
Right, exactly. And I think there's a lot of discussion about how do we try. And I've been working on Park Watershed, a local 501c3 for well over a decade, and it's fascinating how many people think that government's going to do something about it. And I think that's how people felt about Afghanistan, or they felt that about the COVID, the pandemic. And a lot of it really does come down to our own individual actions. And again, the media, and how the media helps us advance ever-changing conversations about the science, because the science is a process of discovery. as a climate change. So Moss, I actually don't know that much about Moss. I mean, I'm more focused on sort of tried strategies like eating locally, eating organically, making sure that conservation, actually the thing I'm most excited about is next year is the confluence of the 200th anniversary of Frederick Law Olmsted's birth and the Clean Water Act, the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act.
Oh, those would be good. Those would be good things to celebrate. Hey, Mary, thanks for people who don't know Frederick Law Olmsted, born in Hartford, architect of Central Park and many other great public uses of land. But yes, what you have is my word that we will do that show. Ideally, before the end of August, we'll do this kind of 3 small ways. We have it in the notes what the other 2 small ways are. I happen to have momentarily have forgotten it due to the anesthesia from my colonoscopy, which I'm going to blame, even though it's not really the problem. I'm going to blame for any cognitive deficits I have today. All right, I'm just going to go right down the line here. Oh, this is a good topic for me. Jack from Middletown. Hi, Jack. You're on the air.
Oh, nice.
Hi.
I recently retired, and I grew up with TIC radio, AM,
Mm-hmm.
and with my little cheap AM/FM battery-powered radio. But since I retired, I got one of those Echo Dots, the Alexa app thing. And I can listen to radio stations all across the nation very easily. And it's amazing to me how 90% of AM stations are very radical right politically.
Yes.
I mean, really radical.
Yes.
They get away with so... what's my point? It's just, I don't understand how this happened. I mean, it's nothing like what I grew up with.
Right. So, I mean, a couple of things happened. One of them was the elimination in the Reagan administration of the Fairness Doctrine, which kind of opened up the way to do something with this vast wasteland of, I mean, AM radio kind of had nothing going on. So much programming had migrated to FM because FM sounds better. What are you going to do with the AM band? And then they figured this thing out, and the elimination of the Fairness Doctrine helped. And then what happened was, and TICs are really interesting. For people who don't know this, I worked at WTIC as an on-air host for 16 years. It's, otherwise a pretty conservative station. And now it's an entirely conservative station. And some of it is, beyond just mere. Anyway, for my 16 years there, I either immediately preceded or immediately followed the Rush Limbaugh show. So I know whereof I speak a little bit. But look, the way this works, or the reason it is that the way that it is they sort of gave up on any kind of broad broadcasting and instead went after narrow broadcasting, by which I mean they're only interested in a target demographic. When I was there, I used to say, like during the 2008 election, because my program skewed kind of liberal, or maybe very liberal, on a conservative station, I was actually attracting, for the first time, a lot of black listeners. And I would say to them, we can really open this up a lot wider. I have women listening. I have, I'm starting to have African-American listeners. And they said to me, that's nice, but basically we are selling advertising to a demographic. Our demographic is males 35 to 54, whatever it was. And that's who they're interested in. And they don't really care if they lose everybody else because all of their, advertising strategies are directed at that demographic. Now, the other thing that happened, and it's hard to tell, there's sort of a chicken and egg problem here. The country began to track pretty far to the right, particularly the right side of the country became more extreme right. The right side media became more, Fox News is now being sort of almost semi-identified as almost centrist because there's stuff, way to the right of them like OAN and Newsmax. It's hard to sort of tell like which thing caused which. I will tell you that if they could figure out how to make more money putting like Noam Chomsky on every day, they'd do it. I mean, the people that I used to work for, they were not politically conservative people. Au contraire. But, basically it's commercial radio, and that's the meaning of the word commercial is dual. They put commercials on the air for commercial purposes, and they try to make as much money as they can, and they do it by targeting a demographic and frequently, repeatedly rewarding and servicing that demographic so it never goes away. And they can say to their advertisers, we will deliver this group of people to you every single day. And so that's why they do it. And they don't do it because they think it's going to make America better. I mean, there are probably some exceptions to that in some of the, some of these chains like Sinclair and stuff like that. But mostly, and I guess Clear Channel has a lean, but mostly they do it because, they've figured out that you can make a lot of money doing that. And if they ever figured out, I could talk about this all day, but that's the reality of it. And it's too bad because, it additionally polarizes an already polarized nation. All right, let's try to get some more calls here. Let's talk to Sue in Kent. Hi, Sue.
Hi, how are you? So my comment is in regards to people who have those little yellow flags in their front yard that, let you know that they put down pesticides and herbicides to totally wreck the ecosystem so that they can have perfect little patches of monolithic grass. And how just absurd it is, this is still going on. Can we, as a community, figure out how to do the pollinator pathway thing, which has been gaining momentum? But there's people who seem like they're smart people who are doing this to the environment, and I just can't understand it.
Yeah, a lot of it's, first of all, the American lawn is this kind of huge sinkhole of resources which are dwindling. It uses a ton of water. And I'm sure, I don't know what it's like on your street. On my street, there are all these, in-ground, semi-automated sprinkler systems for the lawns, which 33% of the water actually goes on the blacktop. It doesn't even go on grass. So there's a big sinkhole for water. And lots of weird chemicals and chemicals that are, they're probably not as bad as the chemicals used to be. Thank you, Rachel Carson, and everyone who came after her. But they're not good for anything. And if it were very difficult, I used to have this neighbor named Ed Tornick. So this is the Ed Tornick theory. The Ed Tornick theory is if it were difficult to grow crabgrass, if it were really hard and took a lot of money and time and effort to grow crabgrass or just sort of, a kind of variegated weedy lawn, then that's what people would want. They want whatever is kind of difficult to achieve or unnatural to achieve. The more it departs from the natural state of your terrain, the more desirable it is. And we really do need to get away from that. And brings us back to moss. There are some places where it might be very appropriate to plant a little interesting little landscape with quite a bit of moss. And as I drive around now, I see some people who kind of let their lawns go wild, or they're growing, big plants and flowers and stuff like that in their yards, and it looks great. But I think there's a lot of peer pressure too. This is Connecticut, we are the hissing of summer lawns. But thanks for your call, Sue. I thought you made a great point. And it's worth thinking about. Yeah, take a look at that lawn. Does it need to look like that? Anybody who's seen our lawn where I live knows we haven't dedicated a lot of resources to achieving perfection. I think that's a fair statement. All right, I can probably take one more call here, and then I'll go to a break. I think it has to be Tim. Tim from Unionville. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
How are things in Unionville? Which do you like better?
Oh, they're great.
Which do you like better, Yusei or Yume?
Say that again?
Well, there's a Chinese restaurant called Yusei that's next to a Japanese restaurant called Yume.
Oh,
we all have to choose.
Japanese. I do prefer the Japanese.
Okay.
Do love sushi there.
All right. You may speak on what you actually called up about.
Oh, yes. I called because I was interested in your stance on UAPs. I'm sure you've read the New Yorker article, seen the 60 Minutes, as we all have. And I guess my question or my line of inquiry would be, where am I supposed to stand? Obviously, there are these things in the sky. But am I supposed to believe the government knows nothing about them? Or am I somehow down this rabbit hole that all the governments have been conspiring together to hide some huge plan?
Right. So in answer to the beginning of your question, where am I supposed to stand, you said, my advice is not on top of a building with a big sign that says welcome aliens. because I saw Independence Day. I know what happens. I think what's really interesting about this is, and we've done a couple of shows now, I think, about it, but one big major show about this, produced by Lily Tyson, about just this incredible shift. I mean, the fact that mainly due to the camera footage from Navy pilots, they just can't get away with pretending this is all nothing anymore. The government has admitted something that I never thought that they would admit, that there's just stuff flying around there and they don't know what it is. I personally, and I think there's sort of a lot of good reasons for this, don't think that this is any kind of proof of extraterrestrials. I think it's proof that there's some kind of technology zooming around up there that isn't very well documented. But I'm going to go kind of Occam's razor on this and say, I think if it were extraterrestrials, they would probably be doing something other than just whizzing around near the jets. They would probably be doing something other than being nuisances. But just out of curiosity, which way are you leaning? Because as Unionville goes, so goes the galaxy.
I really am just so curious about if there were extraterrestrial life, what kind of stories they would have. I'd just be so interested in the movies or whatever they would do on their free time. I would just want to enjoy that. But thank you for answering that. All
right. Well, I don't know that I answered it, but that's there's been a fair amount of writing about why these probably. I mean, you can't say anything dispositive, but these probably aren't from other galaxies and stuff. All right. So we'll take a break. The number, by the way, is 888-720-WNPR. I said at the beginning would be Ask Me Anything, which it is.
He was just an American dream. He was just an American dream. Hey, hey. Lover, don't you come down without a sword or a gun. For the gold and the silver you're searching is hidden out there underground.
Home again, home again. One day I know I feel home again. Wrong again, wrong again. One day I know I feel strong again. I lift my head. Many times I've been told all this talk will make you old. So I'll close my eyes, look behind, moving on.
All right. Welcome to our all-call show. At the beginning of the show, if you remember, I said that we would take calls about anything, but I expected people to want to talk mostly about Afghanistan. No one has wanted to talk about Afghanistan at all so far. Anyway, the number is 888-720-9677, 888-720-9677. Also, it's 888-720-WNPR. I don't personally find it terribly convenient to have to spell out numbers with my phone. I think I would just rather know the number. But some people like it. 888-720-WNPR. We have another UFO. UAF. Is that what we're calling them? Yes, something like that. First, it's like our call-in number. You can't change it all the time. UFOs was just a fine thing to call them. We didn't need another name. But now there's like other little acronyms and stuff like that. No, it's just fine the way it was. Can I just say one thing about the guy from Unionville? So it really is true that in Unionville, there are two very nice restaurants side by side. Yume is a Japanese restaurant. Yusei is a Chinese restaurant. I don't know why that is. I don't think they're like the same family or anything. But anyway, I happen to go there a lot to get food for members of my family. And whenever I go to Yusei, then I come back singing that Lisa Loeb song from 1994. You say you want more beef with your broccoli. And no one, when I get home, knows what I'm talking about. All right. Never mind. Let's go to the phones, 888-720-WNPR. Let's continue talking about UF whatevers with Matt from New Milford. Hi, Matt.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having my call.
Sure.
First of all, I like how you say zero instead of O. That always bothers me.
Okay.
I have personally seen a couple UFO phenomenon. I didn't know you were talking about Afghanistan. I think
nobody has talked about
war.
Afghanistan. Nobody's talked about Afghanistan at all so far today. Don't spoil it.
Okay. It's terrible.
It is, yeah.
If you pick a fight, you should finish it instead of leaving these people abandoned. But I have seen 3 separate phenomena, and even there is a particular event where saw a ship maybe as big as a football field just float over. It wasn't flying like an airplane. It was just floating over. It didn't make any sound. There were airplanes several thousand feet up in the air. I could see them and hear them. This thing wasn't making any sound at all. And, I feel so bad for the people who have tried to disseminate information and have been ridiculed just for recounting something that they saw.
Right, but the worm has kind of turned, I mean, I when we did the show, I think we had the president of the Connecticut MUFON chapter, which is Mutual UFO Network or whatever it's called. Maybe they have to change the name because there's a new acronym. I have no idea. But, he was really talking about the redemption that people felt. People who, everybody is basically Randy Quaid right now, right? And I'm a little bit hung up on that one movie, but, nobody believed Randy Quaid, and then they came back, and then he had to help us destroy them. But yeah, there's a way in which I think the worm has turned. That sounds like a pretty large ship that you saw there. Wow. Were you frightened?
I wasn't at all.
Yeah.
It was crazy because I was living at this apartment building, and whenever you went outside, there were balconies, and people were smoking cigarettes constantly.
Mm.
And this one night, no one was out.
Yeah.
And so I take my garbage out, and then this ship, it had like, on the front of a Knight Rider car, the bouncing light going back and forth.
Yeah.
It had that going on in the front, and then it had a point at the right, left, and rear. I can only assume it was a sphere, or rather a circular craft, because it was so dark and there were no clouds out.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing just floated by, just completely nonchalantly, very slowly.
Yeah. Well, you don't know whether they were nonchalant. They could have been panicking up there. You wouldn't have known, You don't know if they were nonchalant.
No idea.
Yeah, no, they could have been running around going, "We are too close to this planet. We are not supposed to be who did this? We are way too close. Look at that apartment building where those people smoke cigarettes all the time. We're not supposed to go near that thing. Who's doing that?"
Could have been.
Yeah, they could have been just yelling at each other. But, well, anyway, I don't know. What else to say? I think we better move on, or we'll only get UFO calls after this. All right, so we're going to go back to the phones here. I won't even go out the number yet because we have plenty of calls right now. We're going to go to Michelle in East Hampton. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, I just wanted to say hello. I don't have any philosophical or erudite comment about the state of the world.
Okay.
But what a little note about climate change, what I totally find funny is I live in East Hampton, and it seems that everyone is moving here, anyone that can.
Yeah.
And and I think they're forgetting the part about it might be dangerous to live in the coastal area.
Hmm. Well, East Hampton isn't that. Oh, you're in East Hampton. No, you're in the other East Hampton. You're on Long Island.
Yeah.
Oh.
I am on Long Island.
Ooh. Well, yes.
Yeah.
That is coastal.
It's beautiful, but I just find it funny when I think of climate change. Not that is funny.
Yes.
But anyway, I just wanted to say that I love your program. I love all the programs. I work 7 days a week because not everyone here is wealthy. And I come home and I'm cooking dinner and I have my little $20 radio with an antenna, literally, on my shelf. And I love the Moth. I love Fresh Air. I love everything. And I grew up listening to WLNG in Sag Harbor.
Yep.
And I literally visited the station with my father in the 70s. And so I just want to do a little shout out for radio programming, which is making a comeback because, now we have a generation that listens to podcasts. So I love that.
Right.
But anyway, that's all I had to say, really.
Well, thank you for that. It gives me an excuse to say that one thing that we're starting to realize about this show is that it's increasingly more of a podcast than it is a broadcast. And it's a little unusual at this station in that way. That, I mean, obviously we're broadcasting right now. We're live. We're taking calls. We can only do that because we have transmitters, including one in Long Island. But increasingly, I mean, an awful lot of our traffic is going over onto the podcast and listening, whenever they want to, in a way it's pretty unusual. So, I mean, we don't expect that to change very much about what we do, but who knows? Here's Pete in Middletown. If you're on hold right now, I'm pretty confident that I will get to you. So be patient. Here's Pete. Hi, Pete.
Yeah. Hi, Colin. Yeah, I'm in Middletown. I really think it'll come down to the individuals trying to reduce their carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
I recently retired, moved to what was my father's property where I grew up, and he was really into trees, so everything is trees here.
Yeah.
The front lawn, a moss garden, 2 beautiful Japanese maples that we grew from seedlings. I brought black walnuts here, and they're growing all over the place. All trees, all berries, no lawn.
Yeah.
I currently have $40,000 in fines from the city of Middletown. I'm sure it's more than that now because it's $100 a day. Basically because I don't mow my lawn. At least that's what attracted attention to me.
But how can
I heat completely with wood.
Yeah.
I've not burned oil since 1987. Okay. Drive old vehicles that I've rebuilt myself, which I'm also getting problems about. Apparently we're going to not be allowed to do our own stuff with our own material on our own property.
Right.
Okay, that's part of the reason I'm being fined.
I want to go back to the lawn thing. Yeah, I want to go back to the lawn thing and the fines. That seems very incompatible with Florsheimism, as I understand it.
He's a new guy. He's a new guy. This is all.
He's not that new.
This is all unelected.
But he's the mayor.
No, but this is all unelected city employees.
Isn't it like a strong
ordinances on the books? The state has ordinances about it. Okay. My father unfortunately planted invasive bamboo, which I am doing my damnedest to get rid of.
Yeah.
Okay. And it seems to be working. It's going to be tedious and a multi-year situation, but I think I can do it. I'm retired, so I got to do something useful. I'll get rid of the bamboo.
Let me ask you a question. Like when you plant like a black walnut tree or, I don't know, a mulberry or whatever you're planting there, how long does it take for it to act like a tree?
Walnut trees that I planted on this property from the nuts that came from the Eli Whitney Museum. There's a big, beautiful specimen tree on their lawn, the Eli Whitney Museum in New Haven. I didn't even know what a black walnut was.
Yeah.
They looked like green tennis balls all over the lawn. I stopped and picked some up. I was just driving.
Yeah. So how long does it take?
I've got one here that's over 2 feet in diameter right now.
And how long did that take?
Maybe it's all.
How long?
I got the nuts in the mid '80s, so it's been since then. So we're talking, not even 30 years.
Yeah, I'm wondering this because I had to do a little bit of tree work in my yard. Mainly because the trees were, this unfortunately will reveal my bad priorities compared to Pete. But I had to take some trees out because they were about to knock down my cable wires and my internet and all that kind of stuff. Or choke it. They would choke it. But I feel really bad because I allowed a mulberry tree to be taken out. And I know the birds like the mulberry tree. So out of guilt, I'm thinking that I should plant a couple of trees. And also moss, definitely moss. In fact, maybe moss indoors as kind of a decor. Anyway, I am shocked, not really, but I think it would be good as a talk show host for me to say this. I am shocked that if I understand Florsheimism as a political doctrine, and I did take a senior seminar about Florsheimism, so I think I do, I would expect that Pete would be some kind of hero. I think he would be a hero in a progressive America. He would be a hero in a city like Middletown with a progressive champion, practitioner of Florsheimism as a mayor. So I am shocked and appalled. And I think it's a sham and a travesty, and 2 shams and 3 travesties. All right, we have to take a break. I'm just trying to be more like hot takes. I'm trying to do hot takes. That's what it is. All right, the number is 888-720-WNPR. 888-720-WNPR. Let's see if Ben Florsheim calls in. 888-720-9677. We'll take a break. We shall return.
There was a moon and a street lamp. I didn't know I drank such a lot till I pissed a tequila and a corner the full length of the parking lot. Oh, I talk too loose. Again, I talk too open and free. I pay a high price for my open talking like you do for your silent mystery. Come and talk to me. Please talk to me.
Oh, our revels are flying by here. So it's time for me to say thank you to Kat Pastor. She is a steady hand at the controls, as always. She's our technical producer. And up here in the strange world of Hartford, alone and afraid in a world he never made, in the other room is Jonathan McPants, who is producing today's episode and screening calls. A chance to talk to an actual WNPR producer when you call 888-720-WNPR. 888-720-9677. He won't have a lot of time to talk back to you, but you know, anyway, you could like say something. You could say one thing. All right. So I'm going to just take as many calls as I can here. This has been fun. I think we will take one Afghanistan call because it would be good just to have one of them. Yeah. All right. But first we're going to talk to Martin in Mansfield. Hi, Martin. You're on the air.
Hello, Colin. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Been a while since I've called in, and it's great to do it again.
Great to have you.
Anyway, I loved that show the other day about J.R.R. Tolkien and his phenomenal works. And I want to make a little comment on that, but also in the context of what's going on today, because I think there's a lot going on in his books that you only have an hour. I understand you can't get to it all. No problem. The idea about the homo-romantic relationships, especially between Frodo and Sam, very well taken. Not going to argue against them, but I think we also have to keep that in itself in a context that in other cultures, and Tolkien was not American, in other cultures, boys do hold hands.
Mm-hmm.
And even men greet each other with a kiss. So, yeah, I get it, and there is something to it, but I think more importantly, the way I've always looked at the hobbits is basically they're children.
Mm-hmm.
They never grow up. I mean, they become adults, they have kids of their own, etc., but they never really become adults in the way our culture thinks of adults. And I think that is part of his allegory, that the only people who could save Middle-earth were the children.
Yeah, I know. I think that's very true.
Stewards of nature.
Yeah, very true.
Stewards of nature, but they couldn't do it. They needed the children, and the same thing is going on today.
Right.
The adults are not the ones who are going to do it. It's the children.
I think that's true. Whether it's Black Lives Matter or climate change, I think that's absolutely true. I don't mean to speed through here, but I do want to get as many people on the air as possible. Here's Mike from Woodbury. Hi, Mike. You're on the air.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Good.
So you mentioned driving around and seeing signs on people's lawns that say "Unmask our children."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's fine. Obviously, First Amendment, they can put anything they want on their lawn. However, here in Woodbury, there's a diner. I won't mention the name, but anyone who is familiar with Woodbury will know what I'm talking about. And I was in there a month or so ago, and they had a big sign when you walk in and you greet, the person that sits you, whatever that's called, the dais or whatever it is he stands at. There's a big sign on it that said something to the effect of, if you are driving in your car by yourself wearing a mask, you don't need a Biden bumper sticker. We know who you voted for.
Mm-hmm.
And I that's strange. All right. Okay. Well, so then I went in about a week or so ago, and now they have a sign there that says, call Governor Lamont, text him, call him, and say that not to make our kids wear masks in school. Okay. So now, it's a private business. First Amendment, they can do whatever they want, but it just seems like it's incredibly rude. I mean, people are coming in there, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and they are it's like it's going to ruin. I mean, I don't think I'm going to go there anymore. I
Right.
mean, it's like do you really need that? I mean, imagine if they put up like a Black Lives Matter sign or something about January 6th or something. I mean, there would be outrage. But this seems to be fine. I think it's outrage.
When I go to a restaurant, if I see a sign that basically says, we are not especially strict about hygiene, we tend towards the lax end of the continuum about hygiene. Right away I feel like I've made a bad choice. So I'm not really quite sure what they're trying to tell everybody. Well, I know what they're trying to tell everybody. I'm not quite sure it's wise. Let's do one more unmasked thing. Then we're going to talk to David. We are going to have an Afghanistan call. We are going to put an Afghanistan call on the air so that we can say that we covered it. But here's Ralph first in Prospect. Hi, Ralph.
Hi, Colin. I'm creating a bunch of lawn signs, and I wanted to know if you'd like one for your lawn.
Probably not. Actually, we are discouraged. We people who work in journalism and public radio and things like that, we're actually discouraged. And some places have almost official policies that say that we can't put lawn signs up unless they're, if they're like about Middle Earth or something.
The lawn sign is going to say, "Uncar seat our children."
Yeah, I think I see what you did there. I see what you're doing there. I think you can't really rely on the sensibilities of people who are beholding lawn signs to understand the wry paradoxical point that you're making there. There are probably better places, better arenas in which to fight out certain things than your lawn and lawn. I mean, I've, as a political reporter over the years, I really covered a lot of very ugly situations involving lawn signs, including like candidates' husbands who would go and tear in half the. We all remember that one. Tear in half the opposing candidate's lawn sign and stuff. It just brings out the worst in people. All right, so here's our Afghanistan call. It's David in Wadham. Thank you so much for calling, David.
Yeah, thank you, Colin, for taking a call. I'm really kind of surprised you don't have any callers. I mean, Afghanistan is really going to be a significant part of our history and going to be something that we're going to be hearing about for many years to come. And nobody wants to talk about it. And I think that's kind of the very issue of what we faced in the last few days with basically us cutting the cord because all the four presidents, no one had a good plan, no good idea how to do it, and nobody wanted to go through with it. So I give Biden credit for saying, hey, look, cutting the cord, and this is what it's going to be. And someone had to do it.
Right.
We didn't have a good plan going into Afghanistan, and we didn't have a good plan going out of it. And you know what? We could spend another 100 years and still wouldn't have a good plan.
I think that's part's very true in the history of going into Afghanistan. Just ask Russia, for example. I mean, Afghanistan has been a battlefield essentially for 40 years. We think of it as 20 years, but the Russian incursion was in 1979. I will say this, first of all, I think you can make the case that Biden didn't do this well. That if he was going to do it, there were some details that didn't get taken care of. But this is what I was going to say. If this had turned out to be a show about Afghanistan, which I was prepared for it to be, usually when you ask yourself, how did this happen? Why did this happen? The usual answer is us. Us. It's not somebody else. It's us. And so, yeah, Obama ran on getting out of Afghanistan and won. Trump ran on getting out of Afghanistan and won, and actually made a deal right at the end there after he'd lost the election. Biden ran on that and won. And the reason that you can run on that idea and win is because people want it. Most of the polling indicates, around 73% of respondents want to withdraw from Afghanistan, wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan. People want to get out. And as I was reading a piece in The Atlantic that was sort of about this point, in which it quoted one political science expert, a guy named, I think, Stephen Biddle. This is a piece by Tom Nichols called "Afghanistan is Your Fault." And he points out, he's a foreign policy scholar, Stephen Biddle. He says you would need an electron microscope to detect the effect of Afghanistan on any congressional race in the last decade. And Or maybe that's what he said. Or he said it's been invisible, and he's absolutely right. I mean, in other words, as a deal-breaking political issue or deal-making political issue, we don't care about Afghanistan. It's like really, really since 2001, it was like a great source of excitement in 2001. In October of 2001, 88% of the public agreed with the idea of invading and taking the fight there because people were still stung about 9/11. But, since then, nobody cares about this. People started to care about it in the last couple of days because they don't like what they're seeing on their televisions. But we haven't kept it with us. We haven't kept it alongside us as an issue the entire way. And so, that's who I blame. I blame us. We didn't care. We didn't care. And the other thing that I would say about this, since this is my one moment to talk about Afghanistan, is what are the things the American public has a hard time accepting, and maybe they should have a hard time accepting it, is sort of low-level messy entanglements. For example, before we went into Iraq, because of sanctions and no-fly zones and stuff like that, Saddam Hussein had been reduced more to the mayor of Baghdad than to the leader of that entire country. He was kind of a manageable problem, but we don't like manageable problems. We don't, and maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should bother us that, over the course of 20 years, a few thousand of our troops are going to die in a messy but ultimately manageable situation. But that's not our fate. We have kind of a narrative of triumph and victory, and we have a hard time getting away from it. And as a result, we seek triumph, and when we can't attain it, we withdraw. This is certainly not the first time we've done it. Maybe we need to learn to live with that kind of management. And we also have to remember the famous words of Clark Clifford, former Secretary of State. Wherever you go, there you are. And we went to Afghanistan, and there we were for 20 years. All right, so let's end with Bill in Meriden. Hi, Bill. Final call of the day. I want you to land the plane for us.
Oh, geez. I don't know if I can handle that responsibility. Well, just wanted to ask you if I'm sort of a middle-of-the-road guy. Some places I've worked, I've been the more conservative guy. Where I'm working now, I'm a raging liberal. But I'm just wondering, what I like to do is see the other side's point so, that I could respond reasonably to any sort of debate that I find myself in. Lately, though, I don't know if I've gone more left or if the arguments coming from the right are just I can't make any sense of them. There's no common ground whatsoever. Are there any reasonable conservative publications or speakers that are still making some kind of valid point without engaging in the craziness of stolen elections and vaccine fakery?
Yeah, I would say yes. First of all, I think your sentiments are admirable. I think you ought to at least be able to summarize the alternative argument, the opposing argument, so to speak. You ought to be able to say what they think. I actually think the National Review, it's a mix. But there certainly are some, centrist writers or people who are not radically right at the National Review. Or it could also be that William F. Buckley's publication seems less radically right now that tents have been put up way to the right of the National Review. But, writers like David Frum and David French, the two David Fs, I would hold them out as examples of people who are conservative, but you can trust what they say, and they're not crazy conservative, and they don't make up facts, and they don't claim the election wasn't decided fairly or all that stuff. That's where we get into a problem. I think we have to go. But this has been fun, and you have asked all kinds of interesting questions and made all kinds of interesting points. And so you are the stars of this radio show, whatever comfort that gives you.
The number you have reached has been disconnected.